to party.
Hello everybody, my name is Lance Kamau James, and welcome to another presentation of J&M's Associates Hotspot. Today we'll be featuring an artist, a poet, an author, a person who is my close friend, as well as a philanthropist, and his name is Florin Firimita.
Thank you, good to be here, great.
You're looking well. It's been a few years.
It's been quite a few years, right?
A few years. And first of all, I just want to say how wonderful it is that you are celebrated so much. Usually artists who are celebrated as much as you are, excuse my expression, are deceased. And you actually are celebrated, you can live and tell about it. And talking about you being a celebrity, so to speak.
Oh God! No,
I'm going to put it on you. I want to put it on you. You've received quite a few awards. What is probably, without you getting, hopefully you don't get in trouble, what is your best award? You say your most prominent award you've received?
That's kind of interesting you're asking that, because I don't really. I mean, I don't deny. I like the recognition, right? I think the best award is connecting with people. Right, because all these awards come and go, and it's interesting to be recognized, and they look and they add up into your resume. But the best award is actually the ability and the freedom to make the work that I make, and to share with people. That's how I look at it. Those things are, I'm equally happy with rejection and with success. Because I know that the curve can change anytime, right? So whatever success is perceived, I think success in my life means the ability to make my work. That's successful. The fact that you can make, and probably that applies to, doesn't, all these publications, they're important, they're meaningful, and I'm grateful for that, but I think
well, not everybody gets in Vogue magazine.
Right, but like, but when you look at the big picture, the fact that actually people pay attention, that's the ultimate reward, right, or award. That's how I look at it.
Why, and you feel the need to make various types of art, forms of art, and there's obviously, some stress behind it, and there's always some reasoning behind it as well. Why do you feel the need to make various types of art forms?
I started working as a painter, like in painting, like studio art, right, which was very traditional and very conservative in a way. And since then, I've been doing mixed media. I've been doing photography, obviously now. I've been writing. So I think we think that we are, or we put ourselves in corners, and we label ourselves, and then the society labels us. You're a painter, you're a musician, you're a poet, and you're supposed to stay in your box there, right? And with my writing, I was reluctant to write and to publish, because I thought, well, I'm a visual artist, so what am I doing writing? Because I'm writing in a second language, so I feel like I stole the language, right? So it's not my language, so it felt fraudulent, in a way, right? What am I doing? Doing photography, where I never took a photography class in my life. I grew up with my father in my father's darkroom. So none of these things. Your father was a photographer? My father was an amateur photographer. Okay. He did it, I think, because it was, we lived in Romania, which was communist in the 70s and the 80s, and it was his way of fighting depression. So he would do these things on the side, jobs, nothing artistic. He would just get hired and get, photos done at weddings and even funerals. Okay. So it was the magic of being in that.
Turned you on, made you.
So, yeah. So it was kind of like everything that you do. It's about. In my case, it's very solitary. Writing is something you do in a room, or in a space that you're not bothered by external forces. Right. The same thing as painting. Photography now it's a little bit different, but ultimately everything is very you don't have an audience. Like we make, like in your case, you have an audience, and or used to before COVID. But
being a musician,
right. And now us, we don't have, But so you're aware of that. So you're aware of this kind of a limited or limiting. But then you put it out there and you express. So and there's certain tools that you use to create certain things. So when I was doing painting, there were certain problems and certain issues that I wanted to address and I wanted to explore, and those could be expressed better through painting, right? When I was doing mixed media, there was a playfulness, and there was a reason to kind of put together all this kind of puzzles of images from everywhere and create something that was coherent. When I'm writing, what I can say through writing, I cannot say through photography, or what can I say through photography, I cannot say through painting. Mm-hmm. So it becomes specialized, and I learn, I think, in the process, I learn how to give up in the sense of listen to the voices and give up and listen and go with it,
okay,
instead of fighting it.
It's like being guided, or just telling you?
It's like, don't fight it. You're supposed to, or you're not supposed to be a writer. You're not supposed to write a novel because English is your second language and you're a painter. So why are you doing it? You're a fraud. Yeah. And then it comes out. It's almost like I spent 12 years writing my novel, and it fought me to come out because it was telling me you have to do it. It's a weird way to saying it. I didn't do it for thinking of success. I didn't do it to think, I was doing it because it had to be born.
Yes, it's funny because you mentioned me being a musician, and yes, I miss my audience, right. Person to person wise, and and I started out with guitar, and then I moved to keyboards, piano, and a necessity because during the 70s, guitar was big. And you could get in any band and play soul, funk, all kinds of different music. But then it started to fade because jazz started fading a little bit because I was more into jazz. And so the piano was more applicable because it filled in all the gaps. So I could go out as a duet and still fulfill, it would sound like a full band. But here's my point. Of all that, my most success in terms of, we talk about monetarily speaking, has been through African drums, which came about in the 90s. It is like, where did that come from? And then I found myself really now aspiring to African drums. So I see where you're in different mediums, like you're talking about, where something speaks to you and you just go there, and sometimes you don't ask why.
Right.
That can slow things down. And
now that you mentioned this, I'm just thinking that, part of me switching to photography was also a practicality, a practical part of it, because I had, years ago, I had a medical condition, and I had about 8 surgeries on my left leg. And I couldn't stand. It was impossible for me to stand in front of an easel and paint. It was very painful for a couple of years. And it was easier for me, and it was more comforting for me to be on a floor, on a laptop, editing photos. It was a lot more, and it started to become more rewarding. So that was another thing, which was, again, I didn't see that door happening. Yeah. I couldn't paint on the floor. I wanted to paint in front of an easel, but I couldn't do it. So, but photography was easier in a sense of like it was easier for my physical condition, So we adapt. I mean, we have to adapt.
Yeah. And yes, but we love it.
Right.
We love the art. There's just nothing else. I mean, now living in America as you do, and traveling a lot to Paris as you do. As you did, obviously COVID. And we will
Paris is still there, but we can't get to it.
We'll talk about that in a minute. How has there are 2 questions here. One about COVID. Do you feel that obviously COVID has restricted you to a point where maybe your artistic juices are, kind of like came to a halt And Paris is an inspiring. When we think of Paris, think of an inspiring place, you know.
It's
So
always
that
been
really had to really kind of cripple you a little bit.
I was, you know, like all of us, I assume that, you know, the first couple months of this, when everything stops, you know, it's almost like we live in a horizontal hourglass. You know, the time doesn't go anywhere, and it's not vertical. The way the time doesn't flow, the time just sits there, right? The sand sits in a hourglass, and you can't move it. You don't know how to move it, right? So I think for a couple of months I was completely paralyzed and depressed about it, because, you know, I had plans. I wanted to, you know, I was supposed to be in Europe. I was supposed to be in Florence for a couple of weeks, then take my students to Paris and Venice and Florence for another couple of weeks, and make art. And I made these arrangements with some places in Venice and all of a sudden all that stuff it's gone, right? So you go from having those kind of hopes to thinking I'm going into a grocery store and I can die because I touch salad, right? Oh, yeah. And it's absurd because it's not. And I've lived in absurd times before, and I lived in situations where things didn't make sense, you know, in Romania and communist Romania in the 80s and 90s. But for that to happen here was very
mind-blowing.
Confusing and mind-blowing, and it still is. I mean, it's like when you think about it. So, and of course I miss because traveling, it's always been part, you know, I live in northwestern Connecticut, but then that's a home base, and from there I'm just kind of going all over the world. And I love going to museums. Because I find inspiration in everything, you know. So last year I was in Paris with a friend of mine, and we're just having a grand time, just taking pictures and visiting and looking at things and whatever. So I love that kind of energy. And now I am, you know, shooting a series of photographs, you know, in a barn across my house, you know, and it's dirt and dust and heat, and so it's a different environment. But you know, like I said, we're adapting.
Yeah, you're adapting, and it's you know, if there is a silver lining in this COVID situation, is that it slowed us down a bit.
Right.
You know, and where we can't see the forest because the trees are in the way. That's right. So now we can kind of see the forest a bit, and I think that's what's happening with, at least with me. And so, COVID had, like I said, that little silver lining. You know, we hope it goes away. Not the silver lining, but the COVID situation, obviously, and we can open up again, because it's important with artists. I think with person type of interaction is very important. Because a lot of your art, you can answer that in a minute, but a lot of your art involves incorporating people in your art.
Right. Especially late in life, because when I was doing painting, when I was doing mixed media, and of course writing, that involves just you and your materials, right? But now with photography, because I'm collaborating with people, that involves, and even now during COVID, a lot more than it was before, because I think a big transformation what happened, and especially in my photography before and after, was that before I would take pictures and I would direct poses and looking into the aesthetic of an image more than looking or trying to put together an idea and bring it to life, right? So now I'm going from ideas to images, right? So I would write down things like this Dream Cages series that I'm working on now. I would write down things like a shopping list of ideas and then work with that. So it's a shift from just pure aesthetics in terms of composition and all those kind of things to how can I incorporate ideas. Then when somebody looks at my work, it's not white noise, you know, it's not, because there's so much elevator music, right? I was looking at so much bad photography lately, including mine. And and you kind of learn how, I think COVID it's a great a tool to separate things. You know, the oil and the water, you kind of see clearer. I mean, I'm not saying it's a gift, but in a way it is. You know, if you're lucky enough to be alive, and if you're lucky enough to be healthy, and if you're lucky enough to be able to to make a living, then there's a clarity that goes with it.
That's what I think too, and you kind of have to, you know, when you speak on those in that way, you kind of have to be careful. Like, we aren't saying COVID is good. No,
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying,
but as a result of having that pandemic put us in our place, so to speak, and having to quarantine and having to really think about,
right.
It gives us a chance to think about
It enhances,
where we are.
Yeah, it enhances
what we're
our
doing.
awareness of
Yeah.
where we are and why we're here.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Of
That's-
course, yeah, no, COVID
yeah.
is not good.
No, and I have to say, I have to do
right.
the same thing. I have to check myself and say, listen, because you're a teacher. I don't
Right.
think I said that up front, but that is a
Right.
big part of who you are.
Right.
And we are teaching the kids what's going on, and what's going on. Really, we don't even know, but
Right.
to the best. But we can all see it together.
It's a magnifying glass that we, you know, like I'm able to. The fact that I spend so much time. I mean, as artists, you know, we spend a lot of time in our heads.
In our heads.
But the fact that we're that's happening now, you know, we're forced to do that. I think that's also important because you sort things out. You know, it could be crowded at some point because, you know, again, I haven't seen people for 2-3 months, and then it gets too loud. You know, it's like you know, I'm sure it's happened to you. You can't sleep, and you're thinking, you're unsure about the future. But then when the fog, after the fog is gone, or the initial fog is gone, it's like a bomb. You know, the bomb drops and everybody's confused. Or the bus, you know, there's a bus going fast. Somebody hits the brake. Everybody's on the floor. Nobody knows what's going on. You pick yourself up. The bus will continue to move eventually. And, you know, you dust yourself off and you start to think, wait a minute, I'm alive, you know, so then it's a good thing. So how can I be better from now on, you know? I know it sounds like a cliche, but...
That's perfectly, I understand perfectly. And I'm sure the audience is going to understand that too. Because what we're hearing from media is that we're going to try to get better, both in you know, in the world, so to speak, especially in the United States when it comes to racial tension, Black Lives Matter. When it comes to, I was just mentioning, we're talking offline here about a wonderful street mural that's painted on the street. It says Black Lives Matter. I think if you're really in the sky, you can see it really better because when you're actually in ground level, you can't see everything at one time. But that's probably the best thing that's happened to that city, when I'm talking about the city of Hartford, was that murals painted on the street, Black Lives Matter. And it gives us a chance to reflect how we do have to change.
Right.
You know, you, immigrant, so to, you know, you came to this country with expectations. You probably didn't deal in the times that you came, and I'm asking this, with as much as what immigrants are dealing with today.
Right, of course, because, you know, I was a white East European guy, so my issues were different in terms of I didn't bump into right. So, you know, immigration in the 90s when I came to this country, there was a different, you know, we're coming from post-communism Eastern Europe. And I wanted to be part of this country, right? So I wanted to be an American. And you're talking about the art in times of COVID, and the fact that everything is now at once, right? So there's political unrest, there's racial tension, there's poverty, there's unemployment. I mean, the employment is crazy.
It's crazy. I think it's like 10%.
And then you wonder, like, why? You know, it's like I'm there. You know, in your case, I'm there making some music, or I'm in a barn in northwestern Connecticut taking pictures, and you know, it's like, what does it matter? Right? Where does this fit into the picture? And I think you and I were talking about earlier that not that everything has to be political in a sense that we get our banners out and our slogans out, which if that's the case and if that's the best thing you can do, you do it. That's fine. There's a place for people to take on the streets and protest there, but there's also the people to read, a place for people to read, like a story to a child, or to teach a skill somebody, or to work in a soup kitchen, or to take a photo. So just by making art itself in times like this is a political art, I think, because you're not you're contributing to the positive energy of the world. You know, it sounds big, but you're adding something positive to the world. You're not there pulling a trigger of a gun or kneeling on somebody's neck, right?
Right.
You're writing a poem, and that's a balance. That tips the balance a little bit. And if more people do that, then maybe right,
You know,
maybe.
the love. That's what we're talking about here. The love will spread. And as artists, we love. We love to love. We love people. We love our surroundings. We love being alive. We love sharing. I think that's the
that
word.
is the most important.
Yes, and that's a real big component with you, sharing. More so than the fame, more so than the acquiring. You give back a great deal. And in talking about that, something I find kind of funny in terms of giving back. Is that what you were doing when you were in Paris, picking up the street, so to speak, garbage in the street?
I don't think I was giving back. I was
you were
cleaning up.
Take it away, yeah.
No, you know, like you have this. No, last year, yeah, I had I've been going to Paris every year since 2005, I think, or 2004. Anyway, so it's kind of my playground there. You know, my gallery that represents me. It's in their GAT collection, and friends, and it's a spiritual place for me. It's not, once you stop being a tourist, then it's a different city, right? Because you know, for some people Paris is a Disneyland, and for some people it's just an amazing, beautiful city with resources and culture, and you know. So once it stopped being, it's never been Disneyland for me, and I don't think I've ever been a tourist in there. But so years ago, I saw this the staircases that were going into the Seine River, and I thought, you know, we're talking about 14 years ago. And I thought, well, maybe I can do something on this staircase, because there's staircases on the Seine River, old stone staircases going into the river, probably for loading up boats or whatever, in, you know, 200, 300 years ago. And I thought this would be really cool to do something like that. And when I went with a friend of mine last year, I couldn't find the stairs. I mean, it's right there. You can't really, so I couldn't remember. So we spent about an hour trying to figure out. Then I found them. They were just littered with garbage.
Oh.
Everything that you can imagine. So I didn't want to give up. You know, talking about adapting, and I didn't want to give up. So when I bought a roll of paper towels, and I borrowed a garbage bag, because in Paris all the garbage bags are public garbage bags are
in canisters,
and they're transparent because of, you know, of fear of terrorists. So I removed one of those things, and I very carefully kind of spent, you know, half an hour cleaning up and those stairs before, you know, taking some good photos in there. So yeah, so that was my contribution to Paris culture.
Wonderful, thank you. That's in behalf of Paris, I'm thinking.
But yeah, there are a lot of memories like that connect. You know, there are people, there are places and people that they stay with you because of things that happen in those places or with those places, and that's like one of the, you know, funny, interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Beauty, the 21st century. How do you equate what's going on today? Is it relevant? Is beauty relevant now? You know.
I think it's always, I mean, it's always relevant, because we can't, you know, after postmodernism, we kind of stopped talking about beauty because it was a dirty word, right? Because everything had to be reinterpreted and politicized, but the reality of it is that, you know, beauty is a constant. You know, it doesn't matter what goes, what pushes it. It's a flexible concept, right? We pull it apart, we push it, we kick it, but then it continues to flow, right? In whatever forms that, in music, in dance, in poetry. So it's never not going to be relevant. It's always going to be part of the dialogue, in any kind of arts that we're doing. In what percentage and with what kind of force, considering the context now, that's debatable. Because can you say, let's say, I said earlier that making art of any sort, it's a political act. Teaching dance lessons on Zoom, it's a political act. Because again, you're adding a positive energy to the universe. Giving a concert on YouTube, that's a political act. Because you can choose not to. So the moment you withdraw yourself from beauty and from truth and from the good positive aspects of life, then the other side gains power, right? So we can hold on to that. So can you still write love poems in an era where, African Americans are dying in the streets? Sure you can, because that's also, again, elevates, it's a positive thing. Matisse was, during World War II, he, Germany occupies France, so, France splits in two, the occupied France and the free France, so Matisse moves from Paris, I think, to southern France and paints nudes, right, on Nice. And everybody, oh my God, what is this guy doing? How can he not participate? Matisse was an old man. He couldn't pick up a weapon and fight the Germans, right? So his fight was being in southern France and painting these beautiful paintings that we have today. That was his contribution. That was like him holding to, he wouldn't have been effective fighting the Germans, but he was effective sitting there in his studio and painting those paintings, right? So, of course, it's relevant, and I think we have to find our corner, our place within the context of this kind of a crazy mess that we live in, and keep doing. Is it easy? It's not easy, but keep fighting. If you take any flags out, the flags of beauty and truth, and those are the flags that we have to keep up. And that's political. That is political too.
Yes, it is. In some of your work is satirical, maybe, and it speaks to a time, if not now, a time.
Right.
In talking about that a time, you are currently finished writing your novel. Is that correct?
I finished. Yeah, yes. I wrote it. I spent 12 years working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you know you finished? That's
the novel told me. No,
you wanted to be finished after 12 years.
I didn't. Well, I didn't. There was no pressure, because the thing with this book, I felt fraudulent writing a 528 page book, because I never wrote anything more than 20 pages. Then I had an editor at House Beautiful who passed away, unfortunately, Elaine Green, who encouraged me to write, and I fought it for about a year, because you're scared, it's like, what do I?
Well,
it's my second language. I don't know. I never wrote. How do I know what happened in page 20 is connected to what happened in page 427? How do I make that connection? Nobody, you don't go to school to learn how to write a novel. The same thing, you don't go to school to learn how to take a photograph. I don't think that's. I think that comes, the technical aspect of anything, writing. You can learn, but then what happens after you learn? What happens when you? That's right.
How do you take? When you
how
take
do you, what do you take? How do you make it yours? Right.
Yeah.
So spending this much time on this piece of writing that started to happen, right? And I had initially, I think, 1,800 pages of notes, because I would hear voices and I would write dialogue. I would just go, if you look, 1,800 pages is a lot of pages. To organize that kind of stuff into some sort of a coherent work, it took me 12 years. And it was a strange process because there's a structure in there. There's the same thing like the way you work in a musical composition, probably, or the way you work in a photograph, where there's a rhythm, there's a composition, there's a structure, and at some point, I wrote, so I wrote for like 11 years or 12 years, and then I didn't know how to finish it. And it came to me that it's interesting how everything is connected in terms of, painting and relevance.
Yes.
And I was in southern France in this place where I saw this woman with a straw hat. Her husband was taking a picture of her. And the ending of the novel came through me by looking at that woman in this southern France monastery, and I thought that's how I'm going to write this. So I took I went and I introduced myself to her. She was actually she was a Romanian yoga instructor living in London, and I asked permission. I said, I have to. You're the end of my novel, and you're not. I don't know you. I don't know your name, and I just want to take this picture of you because I need to finish my book. And you will be the end of my book. And I lost touch with her because I wish, so that photograph of this woman finished my book, helped me finish my book, wrote, after being, stagnant for a couple. So you don't know how this stuff goes, you don't know how things are connected.
But I think the good thing about that is that it came to you,
right.
Or you waited for
you
it.
You have to wait, and yeah, like we're so focus on productivity. Americans, are very. You have to be busy. Look at what happens during the COVID. We build decks and we're paint our houses and we're like busy because we think that kind of busyness is essential. Maybe that comes out of fear.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Maybe because we're afraid to.
And as a result, it's kept the COVID around, frankly.
Right. Right. Maybe it keeps us from facing, looking in the mirror. Everybody's doing all this stuff, projects, things, selling stuff. You look at Instagram, everybody's selling stuff and perfuming, clothes and whatever. And once that white noise is over, what stays there, it's what matters, right?
Yes, it does. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that lady, I guess, how many years ago? Was that recently? Did you finish your book?
I finished a couple years ago. Okay. And now you're going to ask, I think we talked about it, how, because of all my insecurities. So it's there, 528 pages, it's fine, it's ready. My friend Debbie Sanford went over it. We spent a year correcting it, so it's done. I wouldn't change it. Well, I mean, I'm open to change.
Who says artists are literate? We were not.
Right. So, and I wasn't ready to release it into the world, and now I am, because I felt that this is not, I'm not ready yet. It's like now I'm ready. It's almost like a bottle of wine that has to sit in age,
yes.
And now the book tells me I'm ready. It's a weird thing, So especially because I wasn't linked to a contract or any kind of like financial. Retribution or whatever. So now I can do it. I want to do things in my own terms. When we can, that's the most important thing. So now we can. Now I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's ready, right?
And talk about ready is your art. You want to get to talking about some of your art, and there are three that come to mind: White House.
Mm-hmm.
Morning Dance, which is also a song written by Spyro Gyra, which is one of my favorite, called Morning Dance. And I think the other one is The Ocean, something.
The escape, the door towards the ocean, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about White House. What inspired you to?
Well, I think there are two things that I think there are two schools of thought in photography, and I started as a so-called street photographer, but that wasn't satisfying for me because there are very few strong street photographers that actually can stop us in our tracks. And I'm not saying that with disrespecting anybody because slicing a slice of life out there. I'm just giving the analogy. You go to a grocery store and you buy a piece of meat. I can't put it on a plate for you and serve it to you in that kind of state because it's not it's not appealing, it's not healthy, it's not cooked, it's not aesthetically pleasing. So I have to do something to it. So to me, it's street photography in a way, or any kind of photography that's not conceptual falls into that category, like almost like nonfiction. There's a place for it and it's legit. So that's one school of thought, like the Cartier-Bresson school of thought, where you have to be there on the street and wait for the decisive moment, and you click the shutter release button. Now, you have to be a genius. You have to have patience for that. I don't, and I'm not a genius. I like constructed environments where I have an idea and then I build a photograph or an image based on an idea. So the White House, I had this dollhouse, and strangely enough, people think it's political. But it doesn't matter what people think right now, because people can take anything they want out of an image. And I think that's a beauty of an open work of art, where you think you put in your ideas out there, and then it stays open for other people to come in with their own narrative, right? So if people think this is political, sure. But my intention was mainly about this idea of dream cages, this idea of the anxiety and making art. My friend Caroline Sheridan, who is a ballerina, and I thought to pair that up against, the house is burning, our house is burning, our
it was irrelevant.
collective house is burning. And how do we keep doing? So she's dancing, So we just did that actually a couple days ago, and of course you cannot control the burn, and you can't control, but the idea is there. So I would love to get a couple more dollhouses and burn them. The idea of like burning things.
Okay.
Safely burning things.
Safely, yes.
And so that expresses something, and there's a lot of response to that image based on, again, what people feel towards this, how the world is on fire. So you take something that's real, that happens. If you turn on the news, and if you feel what's happening in this country and all over the world in this past year, and if you cook that up, it's not like I can't slice up a segment of the news and offer it to you, because that doesn't have anything aesthetic. It's just a raw piece of news, right? It makes you angry. It makes you sad. It makes you want to do something. But that's a news. But then if I ask a great ballerina to work with me on this photograph, and I set a dollhouse on fire, and something comes out of it, it's inspired by the news, but it's not the news. So it becomes a metaphor too, based on what's happening.
Interesting. And that would probably lead up to why you created the escape, because maybe something burning, time to escape, right?
Right. I was that's probably this idea of like dream and reality and parallel universes. Has always appealed to me. Like I'm interested in we live in a world of images. Everything is images, right? So we're image based, and because of that, there's so much pollution. There's so much visual pollution. We're bombarded with images on so many levels. How do you respond to things that they're meaningful to you? The same thing with a song. Like you listen to a song in your car, and you listen to the same song over and over and over again, and you ignore it. Right. So what is it? Why is it that's it? You go to a museum, there are hundreds of thousands, millions of pieces of artwork. We go back to that room to look at that particular painting because it speaks to us, right?
Yes.
So I think if in any work of art, and the same thing with a piece of music, or a piece of writing, or a photograph, if you allow enough room for the viewer to bring his or her own experiences, I think that completes it. And there's always enough room in there for everybody to bring their own stuff. And that is open. You can be and say, this is about this, all right? Because if I said something about the White House, this is a political thing and it's about what's happening in America and political. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is like, take it,
what you think,
and make it yours, right? And I think that's the cool thing about art.
And I think that's probably a measure of your success as well. That your art speaks to people in many different ways. So they see, they may not say what you were saying or feel what you were feeling. They're reacting their own way.
I'm started domino. I push the first domino piece.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter.
Let it rock.
It's not destructive. It's playful. So I'm pushing. I'm the first one. So the direction of the domino might not be where I think the domino would initially go. But I'm totally happy with that.
Yeah. And that leads up to another piece I wanted to speak on, and that's Morning Dance.
Yeah,
Morning
that was
Dance,
last year in
which
Paris.
Are you familiar with the tune Morning Dance?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I'm not actually. No,
It's
even if
a wonderful
I'm
tune.
not,
Spyro Gyra is written by,
I will
back in the
look it up today. Okay.
Yeah, man. And so so what's behind that?
Well, we're in Paris last year, and one of the things that you're talking about the highlights and rewards and things like that. There are two major things that happened in Paris last year. One was being invited to shoot in the Rodin Museum in Paris, right? Which was an amazing thing, and it was initially paralyzing. Then we came up with some amazing stuff. After that initial shock of like, what am I doing here? How can I do anything in this kind of, whoever said like, nothing can grow under the shadow of big trees. What can I do in this space? The museum now has 10 of those photographs, 10 of my photographs there, which is also strange. So that was one of the highlights, being there and shooting there for a day. And the other one was this clock that, again, also had to wait. I've been to the Dorsey Museum, which is the Impressionist museum. It's a former train station in Paris. And knowing so much about Paris and being so curious about Paris, there are two of these clocks in the train station. The train station now hosts some of the most amazing Impressionist paintings in the world. I've been there many times. Wow. And what I also found out is that was also the train station where a lot of the Parisian Jews were sent to concentration camps from that place. So every time I'm in there, I don't know how many people who visit know that, but knowing that and seeing pictures of these trains living, and I think there were like 42,000 or something like that, Parisian Jews that were sent to concentration camp. It makes such a weird balance with the fact, the beauty and the suffering. Those people were, not too many came back, right? 15 years ago, I had this idea, what can I do with this clock? But then there's always people, there's so much traffic in there. And I wanted to do something that meant something, because people go there and take selfies with the clock and whatever. So I thought, let's do something with this dance in front of the clock. So my friend Megan was there in front of the clock. We had to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning before it opened, and we had to rush because I knew exactly where the clock was. We had to rush and be there, and I probably had a minute or two before the big crowds came in. So it looks very silent, and so in a way it's like what was in the back of my mind was this image of these people leaving the train station for concentration camps. And I know it doesn't make any sense when you look at the picture, but that image of these people leaving to their deaths from that space brought me into this image, right? So it's weird how things work and how things are connected. And it's not directly about the Holocaust, and it's not directly about violence and injustice and whatever. It becomes about something else, but it's inspired. Again, it's like, it's the meat in a grocery store that gets cooked in a way that hopefully it's meaningful.
Yes, and it's history.
And
that you made relevant to speak to what you wanted to get across with that particular piece. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, did just kind of an offshoot question, did the clock chime, or is it at certain times?
I don't know if it still works. I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, just the fact that it's old and it's
Right, and that there's transparency.
history
At
and-
night, they have lights basically so you can see.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's,
I
it's like
loved
a
all-
giant stained glass
Yeah.
window.
Well, the pieces that you picked out to talk about today were all just powerful pieces. I got, it's funny listening to you speak on them because maybe 2 out of 3 I was on the same trend of thought you were on, and I find that to be kind of interesting.
I think I'm sorry. I think the challenge is like how to anchor the viewer to something that's meaningful, or creates meaning in a world that we're surrounded by images, right? So how do you stop and say, wow, this is interesting, right? And I do that when I teach too. It's like there's so much stuff that I call elevator music, but everything that becomes repeated and becomes normalized through that repetition becomes elevator music. It's like it you can't listen to it anymore. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. If I hear it every day, I'm not interested in it anymore. Mona Lisa. I've been to the Louvre many times, and I chose finally to go and see it after 10, 15 years, and I wasn't that impressed because it was embedded into my head. That kind of universal consciousness that we have, that the memory is like, I've been told that she's important. So how do you make something that's important? How do you make somebody weep or be ecstatic with joy when you play a concert and that's
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I learned a lot from you. I also learned that you are still relevant. You are still gifted, and you're inspiring. That's the word I'm looking for. So I just want to say thank you again for making this Hotspot podcast happen. It's definitely a boost in the arm for our channel to have you on. I think the audience may have picked up that maybe they didn't, but we go back some 20 years, if not more.
20, yeah.
Yeah, at least.
2001.
Yeah, 2001. And so I just hope that, God willing, we have another 20, 50 years.
Remember, we went to
Trinidad
together. Yeah, it's like that's another thing. April 2001.
Yeah. And I was an artist in resident, and you were an art teacher in the program. Mm-hmm. Wonderful program, multicultural program we were in together. So I just want to say to the audience, you have witnessed what I think is a great situation where we have a great man here, a great artist, a great photographer, and his work is all over the place, and I'm sure there'll be even more of his work all over the place for you to view. And we particularly will feature 3, I think, the Escape, Morning Dance, and White House. So you get a chance to see those as we were speaking of them. I want to thank our videographer, Mr. Peter Cofrancesco, for giving us the time of his expertise. And at this particular time, I want to sign off and say sayonara and thank you for viewing in.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you.